Oh, that's fine. I'm like, why don't I see it? There you go. So made some interesting changes to the racial passives. Real quick, high elf, best in slot for light armor. This regen here, even though it's only when you cast abilities, typically you're going to be casting class abilities at least every 6 seconds. Like to complain that it's only related to class abilities is kind of irrelevant. Gives you a good amount. My real question is, does this work like Warden, right? The Warden passive, because it says it gives you back Magicka or Stamina based on whichever is higher after activating a class ability. So I'm wondering if this works like the Warden, right? The Warden has a passive that does this exact same thing. Whenever you heal a friendly target, it gives you, what is it, 250 either Stam or Magicka every second. When you heal someone who's at, what is it? Actually, yeah, but just when you heal somebody, but it's not one, like, it's not like if you're Max Magicka, it gives you back Max Magicka whenever you heal. It's like with whichever pool is higher at the moment, it gives you the lower one. So if you were like full Stam bar, but you only got 10k Stam, and you got 40k Magicka, the moment your Magicka dips below your Stam, it starts filling up your stamina pool, your Magicka pool. And then of course, if your stamina pool is full already, it'll just keep on filling up your Magicka. So I wonder if this works the exact same way. Did they give High Elf that exact same passive? Will it work that way, or is it just like whichever is your max pool? I don't know. I have to wait and see how that works out. They gain reduced damage reduction, 5%. Right? This is like a no-brainer if you want to go a damage dealing Templar, because both your jabs, radiant, flare, you'll gain 5% cost reduction. Damage reduction, and you could couple that with Cyrodiil's Light for more damage reduction, and you're in light armor. GG. That was not the best option. And then of course they gain more damage, right? They changed the 4% to max spell damage. Of course that will be affected by major and minor, right? What is it called? Spell symmetry? I forget the name of spell sorcery, right? So you'll gain, what is it, 30% now? I think minor is 10. Templar has both, right? So you can get either from a potion or from what's it called, Mage's Guild, right, to get the major one, and then Templar has a passive to get the minor one. So this will be buffed by what, 30%, so that'll be 300 plus 310, 320, whatever, right? You get 2k more max Magicka, so it's no longer dependent upon your max Magicka. It's not percentage based. And then you get the damage reduction, and then you get this regen and that 575, right? So if that procs every 6 seconds, right, 575, and it's basically 3 ticks. It's the equivalent of 191, right? You get the damage bonus. You're taking less damage while you're on while you're on offensive. It's like a no-brainer, right? Just pick that one and go. Argonian is pretty much the same. No, not real change. They did nerf the return from the potion by 1,000, but that passive is still worth, what is that, 3600. Potion is what, every 45, so it's 22 ticks, so it's still worth 163 regen for everything, HP, Stam, and Magicka. Immune to disease, so basically they can't get minor defiled passively from like Nightblade, right? So that's one good thing. They did reduce their healing received. Now it's only healing done, which is fine. It's 4%. So that 6% kind of will balance out with the inability to gain Minor Defile, unless you're running a set, that gives you Minor Defile. So basically, they're immune to Minor Defile. I don't think there's anything in the game that gives Minor Defile. I think it's all passively. I forget, or from a set. Wood Elf, still best for Nightblade. Now you don't have to utilize a bow, because now they passively get 20% movement speed when they dodge. So that's good. Or of course you can just stack it with a bow. And GG Nightblade, right? Nightblade got more recovery because Nightblade has... It was actually better to have a numerical value than the actual 21% when it came to Nightblade. Because if you didn't have a high base, a low base didn't really matter. So now you've got a higher base coupled with medium armor, potion from what is the major stamina recovery, and of course the 15% that Nightblade gets, and then now they get the extra mobility. So now they can actually don't have to go bow, stick in heavy. You'll gain more armor, flat 2k, immune to poison, so that means less damage from like poison injection procs. They reduced the stealth damage, the critical damage, so they'll do less critical damage, and that's basically reduce the damage from the one-shot bow snipe from stealth and disappear, and then they increase their stealth detection radius, which is kind of worthless. Breton, really good if you're going heavy armor, especially for heavy armor DK. You'll gain a little bit of cost reduction, flat 2k bonus to your max Magicka. So really good choice for Magicka DK. Magicka DK's skills costs like so much. I think like 11 out of 15 have a base cost of 4,000. And like 9 of the 11 have a base cost of like 4,500. So that's 700. Can combine that with like Heavy Seducer, and that will give you a lot of sustain, since Magicka DK particularly relies on potion and alt. Dark Elf, which was the go-to damage race, got nerfed. They lost the 7% as well as the 2%. Their max Magicka got nerfed. They gave them 600 more HP, which doesn't matter. They gave them probably the equivalent of maybe 500-600 more stamina, but you lost quite a bit of Magicka, like around, I don't know, probably like around 700 max Magicka. You lost, I think, quite a bit from here. I think it's a good trade-off because there's a lot of Magicka DK abilities that like do damage, like magic damage. And of course the flame damage did not increase your healing from like Kawag. So I guess it's a decent trade-off. But of course Dark Elf just got better if you run a hybrid, which I do. I run hybrid DK. So you just basically got an extra 330 Magicka and weapon damage. So really good for hybrid builds. So I'll be sticking with that for my hybrid DK. Imperial, in my opinion, Imperial got a nerf, at least in terms of HP. That was a huge thing. They are getting 2k, but I think usually you'd get more without even having to put points, just passively, because there was like 12 or 13%. This actually got a buff. Red Diamond got a buff. It's actually changed to direct damage. So whenever you do any direct damage, you have a chance to heal for 1750. That is, of course, affected by anything that affects healing. So if you're wearing heavy armor, you'll gain an extra 8%. What is it? 1750 divided by 2. When you're in Cyrodiil, it's 875 plus whatever you have, major minor buffs, heavy armor, whatever else that will affect it. It still can crit. Red Diamond can crit, so they got a little bit of a buff. Prior to it, it was it only procced 10% of the time on melee damage. Now it procs on all direct damage. So, you know, of course, bow build, right? If you're running poison injection, you know, you have a chance to proc Red Diamond 50%. And of course, they got the reduced cost to block and bash. I would rather that be increased damage with bash by 5%, and then maybe light attacks by 5%. If you want them to be sword and shield, which works really well if you're frontline Imperial, because you have the higher HP pool, you've got a nice high stam pool, you've got the weave with the chance to restore, you know, probably going to be around like 1k in PvP after any buffs that you have. So when you're weaving, you know, your light attack, ransack, bash, you have a 15% chance on each hit, right? So each light attack, the ransack, and the bash all has a chance to proc Red Diamond. So that's a good change. Khajiit basically got the nerf to critical damage from stealth, but they gave them the critical chance for both Magicka and stamina, right? So now you'll have 8% more spell critical, and then that's just to make them more viable for Magicka builds. They nerfed the shit out of their health regen and gave them a flat 100 health recovery and 75 Magicka and stam, which is pretty shit. That health recovery was really good because you could couple that with, you know, like heavy armor, potion, if you're a DK, Troll King, you know, stuff like that. So that got a nerf. Nord, it's kind of a toss-up. So people are talking about oh, Nord is immune to chilled. It already is on live, so this is not new. I played a melee Magicka Nord Nightblade, specifically because in Battlegrounds there are so many people running, you know, Frost, and then you get constantly rooted. That's why I was willing to get rid of, you know, you lose like 8%, 10%. Not going a Magicka race wasn't that big a deal damage wise, but not having to like burn my stam, roll dodging, getting rooted nonstop. And of course I did it for the health regen. So I ran a melee Magicka build, and my base health regen was like 2300 health regen. I was in light armor. I had 2k stam, 2k Magicka regen, 2200, and about 1200 with my stam regen. It's a really high regen build for just, you know, because melee Nightblade doesn't have a lot of access to good heals as a Magicka build. You're kind of reliant on resto, and I wanted to not be reliant on resto. But this, in my opinion, good for all other damage builds, but the meta is stam. The meta is dual wield stam. So this is actually a nerf, because at the very least you took 6% less damage from a lot of the bleeds. People run, you know, 3 different bleeds, you know, between dual wield, the passive, the 2H plus that passive. It's like, it's ridiculous. So this is actually a nerf because bleeds bypass this 3900. It's still equivalent to 6%, but if you run heavy armor, you were already capped. So in PvE, this was useless. You actually wanted the 6% in PvE because you were able to achieve, you know, the 50% reduction through just armor, and then that 6% push you over the cap. So you basically lost that. You lost the regen from health. For some reason, right? Nord is 9% health, and you look at Imperial is 12. Imperial gets 2k HP, and Nord gets 1k. I don't know like what's their like how they're basing this. It just seems like they're just pulling numbers out their ass. Because if you look, Stalwart gave you 6% to your stamina, and for some reason that's representative as 1500. But you look at Imperial that had 10% to stam, it's represented here as 2k. So, and you'll see later on with like Orc and other, like they're just pulling these numbers out their ass. It's I would have much rather had the 6% plus the health regen, and you'll end up with more HP live. So you'll actually end up with less HP with this patch for Nord, and not really be as tanky as you think you might be, because there's so many things that bypass physical and spell resist. You know, there's a lot of oblivion damage, bleed damage, people running around with Taurox Pact bleed builds, werewolf. This isn't going to do anything for you, and especially without the health regen. That was kind of the point to racials like Nord and Orc, but in particularly Nord, because Nord had the rugged, which gave them a little bit of damage reduction, but then you had the health regen to kind of supplement other things that you were missing, along with high health, and then the inability to be chilled, so you weren't getting rooted constantly or getting affected by minor maim, right? Because when you're chilled, procs minor maim, as well as when you're running a ice staff and you're running blockade, it roots all chilled opponents, right? So that's how you were able to avoid being rooted. It's like that on live now. This is no change. The immune to chilled is not a change. It's been that way. Orc got nerfed. Orc lost health regen. The healing received got reduced to 4%, down from 5. So that's big. That was a big way for them to sustain. Instead, they got it says when you deal damage only with a weapon ability, so that will work with like poison injection. You have to make sure you keep your poison injection up, and it will restore 380 health and stam. And of course, this is every 4 seconds, right? So that 380 is cut in half in Cyrodiil. So is that 190? It's 190, and then it only happens every 4 seconds, right? So that's only divided by 2, 95, right? That's pretty shit for what they lost. So that's a big nerf to sustain, at least in terms of health. But they kind of gave them the little bit more stam recovery, and of course this is not affected by like medium armor or potion or anything that increases your stam recovery. It's just a flat return whenever you do. It's of course it's only when you do damage with a weapon ability, which kind of I'm not sure if it would work with like the passive proc from 2H, the bleed, but I'm sure it would work with the dot as well as the dot from poison injection. If you're running sword and shield, that's a nerf, because when you disengage, you don't have anything that's persistently hitting. So if you LOS, you basically lose both the health and the stamina recovery. Of course, that's only every 4 seconds. Swift Warrior, the 4% got turned into max weapon damage by 258, and then the reduction is still the same. But because of the meta, this really doesn't mean anything, because you're not as fast as you used to be, you know, without Swift trait. There's slows everywhere, there's roots everywhere, so that isn't really all that important. Even for like Stam Sorks, they lost a lot of mobility because of the meta, because of all the roots and slows in the game. Redguard got buffed. I don't know why. They got reduced cost to weapon abilities, by 8%. So poison injection, critical rush, execute, um, anything dual wield, which is the meta. If you're running sword and shield, this also reduces weapon alts. So weapon alts are 8% cheaper, right? So two-handed alt is a bit more reliable because shuffle got nerfed and dodge roll got nerfed. So 2H alt is, in terms of landing, is more reliable. It's 8% cheaper now if you're running a red guard. So you're like red guard stamp sork has a huge amount of weapon alt reduction. Or if you're running sword and shield, if you're running a bow build and you're using ballista, good option. Of course, they gained the max 2 stam, 2k, and then they buffed adrenaline from 752 to 950. It's when you deal. Before it was only melee damage, now it's direct damage. So again, the first hit of poison injection will now give you back stamina, snipe. Of course, this will make snipe spam cheaper. Good job, Zos. So not the best choice. I mean, red guards were really strong as they were. They just buffed them. Why? I do not know. I don't really agree with that. And that's basically it. So basically for next patch, in my opinion, best in slot is red guard for all stam builds. That reduction, especially for no CP, the reduction coupled with the buff to adrenaline rush, you still have the max stam. It's like a no-brainer. Orc, in my opinion, took a huge nerf from the lack of health regen, and the new one is not really all that great. The unflinching, it's in terms of the health and stamina recovery every 4 seconds, and then they nerfed their health and stam. So Brawny gives 6% health and stamina, and they nerfed it to only 500. Why? I don't know. I don't know why. That's not exactly the best choices. Also, one thing I forgot was Stalwart was health recovery and max stamina. So the max stamina is fine. I would much rather have the health recovery. They nerfed the shit out of it, and they gave them 5 ult every 10 seconds. And a lot of people in the forums are like, "Oh, this is amazing! It's like a mini minor heroism." It's not. It's shit, right? So just take a 200 ult, just with regular ult gen, right? Every 3 seconds. Roughly it's 67 seconds to use. Like if you're a DK, to use your ult, right? So with that 5, right, that's basically 0.5 a second, right? So instead of 67 seconds, right, if you have a 200 ult divided by 3.5, it's 57 seconds. So it shaves off less than the 10 seconds, right? But the problem is, the moment you hold your ult, right, this is the same problem people who run like DK regen, ult regen builds. If you hold your ult past the point of where it's usable, right, the moment you hold it past that, you're negating your regen build, right? Because the whole point of running an ult regen build is for the persistent damage from the ult, as well as the regen that you get as a DK, right? So the moment you go 10 seconds past having your ult, this passive is useless. Just remember that. And that basically, so that the cheaper, I think if you're running, what is it? I forget how much is, I think it's 135, right? Divided by 3.5 is 38. And if it was just 135 by 3, yeah, so it's a persistent 7-8 seconds. The more ult you the more expensive it is, the more you're gonna get out of the new passive for the alt. The problem is that the moment you hold your ult, which a lot of people do, a lot of people will hold their ult to try to close the kill or to set up for a big burst. So the moment you hold your ult past the point of it being ready to use, it diminishes this this passive. If you're a werewolf in your werewolf form, this passive is useless. The only thing, even if you were running a decisive trait, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make, like, in my opinion, this is a shitty passive. If you're running, right, if you're a Nightblade, like, people are like, oh, imagine Nightblade. Let's just do it. What is it? I forget, what is the new one? Is it 110? Right, it's 70 divided by 3. It's about 23 seconds. And if you do it 3.5, right, again, no change. 3 seconds. It's not worth it. When you compare it to Redguard, even if you compare it to Orc, right? But when you have things like this, like Adrenaline Rush, like, you can't sit here and be like, oh my god, and fucking drooling over 5 ult every 10 seconds. Like, come on. Let's be realistic. I mean, I would rather have the Khajiit passive, the 100 to health recovery, and the 75 to stam and magicka, because at the very least that it's affected by major and minor buffs. At the very least. And if you're wearing medium armor or heavy armor, you know, you kind of get a little bit more. There's no way to eke out more ult. Like, it's not worth running decisive just for this passive. Because every 10 seconds you might get one more ult. It's like, it's no point. It's a shitty passive. I really think they could have made it more viable. They could have made Nord more viable. And I think this is more of a nerf. Especially with the meta being dual bleed. This extra spell and physical resistance is useless. Because the meta is dual bleed and oblivion damage. So this is useless. So even you're thinking, well, with oblivion damage, you know, Rugged didn't reduce it, but at the very least you had the health recovery to back it up. So they kind of lost that. So in my opinion, stay Dark Elf if you are a hybrid DK. I know that's becoming more popular. I've been running hybrid DK for a long time now, like over a year. But if you're running heavy armor DK, I think Breton is better because of the cost reduction. You get cost reduction plus 100 to your magicka recovery and a flat 2k. And if you're running light armor, high elf is best for a damage. You gain so much damage. You gain so much damage and the recovery. And then of course if you're gonna go like healer or PvE tank, even PvP tank, right? Argoni is still best. Because the real issue is not the resource gain passive, it's the infused jewelry with the potion reduction coupled with this is what the real issue is. So this only is like a minor fix to a more major issue. So now people are complaining. I mean, Argonian needed a nerf for a long time. And then Wood Elf, Nightblade's got a buff. They're fast as shit now. Because there's 20% stacks. Because it's major minor plus 20%. So they were trying to remove, I mean, as far as I remember, they wanted to make everything major and minor. They didn't want to have like all these other ones that gave you like X percentages, and then they go and do this. I have no idea why. It's kind of stupid. They could have done something better. I guess their idea was to try to make it more viable, like all races to be more viable. In my opinion, Nord is still not worth running in the meta, unless the meta changes to more like regular damage and less Bleed Oblivion damage. There's no point in running Nord. Like, just to run it for the chilled is not enough. It's just not enough. Orc got a nerf, so in my opinion, there's no reason not to go Redguard. Like, for stand builds, if you're not a Nightblade, or if you're not a Night, or I should say, if you're not a Nightblade in medium armor, if you're like running heavy armor Nightblade, go Redguard. If you're running medium armor, stay what's it called? What else? But hopefully we'll have to wait and see. But this is the current state of what they've released for the racial changes. I really don't think a lot of these changes are that great, especially for Mag DKs. In my opinion, they're going to take a little bit enough because there's no reason not to run Breton or High Elf. There's no reason to run Dark Elf over Breton or High Elf. It's just, it is what it is. So I'll have to wait and see. It's been a while since I've played. Still see a lot of things that haven't been addressed in Battlegrounds. Uneven matches. The bleed meta is still alive and kicking. I really don't see much of a difference between running Taurox Pact builds, especially as a werewolf. You can couple that with the bleeds, dual wield, Taurox Pact, procking the glyphs nonstop. I still haven't seen. I've been gone for a couple, like 4, 5, 6 months. I can't remember how long I haven't played. It's been a while. But yeah, these changes are not all that great. But let's wait and see if they come up with something better with over the next coming, weeks and months. Because I believe this is not going to be this fucking phone. I think shut it off twice already. Yeah, I believe this is not slated to come out till June. At least, well, that's the next patch. We'll have to wait and see. But I think PTS is Monday. I think PTS is this Monday. But let's wait and see. Keep posting on the forums for a better option than just running Redguard. Because right now, Redguard